So today's lesson is about an introduction to DNA and other genetic material. This lesson is from January 17th, and your due first was related to the lab that we did on the different types of seeds and the adaptations they have. Here are the questions, the answers to those analysis questions that you can check for yourself. And so today we'll be able to explain how genetic instructions or DNA is organized, and you'll also be able to talk about a little bit about why it's important. For example, DNA and how it's organized is important because of understanding how diseases and cancers can be inherited. Our country needs more people to research DNA, and of course, a lot of the multiple choice questions will be about DNA and genetic instructions. So, genetics is the study of how you inherit DNA from your parents. So, for example, it's why people say, I got it from my mama. The study of how DNA and genes get passed on from one generation to the next is also genetics. You get half of your DNA from your mom, half from your dad, and no one in the entire world has the exact same DNA as you do. So in eukaryotes, where would we find DNA? Inside what cellular organelle? Should have said the nucleus for that one. So how is the genetic code organized? And genetic code just means like anything that has to do with DNA or genetic material. So first, we have the cell. Everyone has cells, and then inside a eukaryotic cell you have the nucleus. Inside of the nucleus you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. If you unwind your chromosomes, you get DNA. DNA has lots of little sections that are in charge of different things. Those little sections are called genes, and then genes are actually the instructions for making a protein. So just to kind of give you more of a visual, your body is made entirely of cells, and that should not come as a surprise to you. Now, if we take a look at your cells, like let's say in your foot or wherever, you're going to see that you have lots of different cells in there. If we put those cells underneath a microscope and look at them even closer, pretty powerful microscope, you would see that you have a nucleus in each one of your cells since you are a eukaryote. But if you look inside of the nucleus, you see that we have our DNA. Now, our DNA is not just all loosey-goosey in our nucleus. It is wrapped up in nice little packages that we called chromosomes. So inside of our nucleus we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and each chromosome kind of looks like a little X. So the chromosomes contain DNA, which are the instructions for how to run the cell. It's like the blueprint of our body. So you can see here this chromosome is being unraveled, and this chromosome is made up of that DNA. Now, DNA is really, really, really long, so there's little sections of DNA that are in charge of different things, right? So each little section is called a gene. So a section of DNA is called a gene, and a gene is in charge of one particular trait. For example, one gene may be in charge of the trait for eye color. So each little poster here showing you that DNA can be divided up into sections called genes. Now, genes are like a recipe for making something special called a protein. So your body reads the instruction that the gene has in order to make proteins. Now, the gene, though, is this recipe that's written in a special code. This code contains only 4 letters, C, T, G, and A, and these little letters are known as bases or base pairs, or even in some cases, nucleotides. So the genes are in charge of different things, and they make special types of proteins. So your DNA or your genes or your chromosomes or all your genetic information are really instructions to make these proteins. Now, why do we need proteins? Proteins do different jobs. Some proteins will send messages to your brain. Other proteins build your teeth and your bones. Other proteins that your DNA and your genes make your heart beat. These purple little dots represent those proteins. We have other proteins that digest your food, different enzymes. Some proteins are going to let your muscles work properly. And sometimes there are changes in the gene that keep a protein from doing the job. These changes in the gene and in those base pairs are called mutations. Mutations is a change in the genetic code or a change in the gene or the DNA. Now, when mutations happen, it can sometimes negatively affect the body so that messages may not be sent correctly to the brain, or teeth and bones may not form correctly. Or if you have a mutation in that protein isn't made, the protein's not going to be able to make the heart beat correctly, or those enzymes in your stomach won't let your food be digested properly. And in other cases, people won't be able to move their muscles properly if they don't have the right protein. So when you have a mutation, the mutation will mess up how the protein is made, and if that protein isn't made right, then the stuff that the protein controls will not work the right way. Now, a little bit of a different topic. Because everyone has different DNA, we also are going to be different from each other. There will be a lot of what we're going to call variation between organisms. There's variation in all living things because all of our DNA is different. So here are some examples that we can actually see of differences we might have based on what type of genes we get. So whether or not you can curl your tongue, that's in charge of a gene. The type of hairline that you have, whether you have a widow's peak or not. The color of your hair and the color of your eyes is determined by your genes. How far your ears stick out, whether you have your earlobes are attached or unattached earlobes. The size of your nose. And, when you look at DNA, you say, wow, our DNA must be so different because we all look different, but really there's just a small amount of our DNA that's different. Humans actually share 99.99999% of the exact same DNA. We share 90% of our DNA with a mouse and 98% of our DNA with primates or monkeys and gorillas. 85% of our DNA is the exact same as a fish, and 75% of our DNA is the exact same as a plant. So all living things actually have a lot of overlapping DNA, and so you could even say that a lot of the proteins that we make are the same too. But even those small differences are enough to make us all look very different. And this is all because of our DNA, our genetic code, our hereditary information, our genes, our chromosomes. I'm just trying to think of all the different things that DNA gets called. But that is our genetic information in a nutshell. So just going back, I want you to really focus on remembering this order from largest to smallest, from our cell, which has our genetic information inside of it, all the way down to the genes and those base pairs, which eventually have the instructions for making a protein. You can go back and pause this and replay the little video that I showed you so that you can actually draw the pictures of a gene, a chromosome, a DNA, a nucleus, and the cell, and I want you to draw those in order from largest to smallest. Of course, I always recommend you to go to BrainPop as well to check out what they have to say about your genetic information. And then again, it's really important that you remember those little letters that are called bases, and they make up genetic code just the way that letters make up our own alphabet. So those bases and base pairs in our genes are really important for making those proteins. Another key point is that the mutations, those changes in the DNA, there's different types of mutations. There's some where an extra base is added, sometimes a base or one of those letters is deleted, and sometimes a base gets changed just kind of randomly when cells are dividing, and sometimes other chemicals and things can cause mutations. When bases are changed, lost, or deleted, the protein is not going to be made correctly because the DNA is not going to be read correctly. The code will be messed up. So, given this information, I want you to go ahead and try these exit ticket questions. You can pause this here and then check your answers in a moment. The answer to number 1 would be that a mutation where the T's disappear from the code would be bad because the person would no longer be able to make the protein that helps a person digest milk, and so that person would not be able to eat any dairy products. The answer to number 2, the relationship from genetic information from a cell to protein, would be a cell contains a nucleus. The nucleus contains 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chromosomes are coiled up DNA. DNA is a very long strand of genetic information that contains smaller sections called genes, and those genes are made up of base pairs, and those base pairs and the genes are instructions for how to make a protein. Number 3, the definition, or the word that goes with A, the section of a chromosome that controls an inherited trait, that would be a gene. For B, DNA that's passed from parent to offspring would be the chromosome. C, the organelle where DNA is stored, is the nucleus. D, the smallest unit of life is the cell. And E would be DNA.